when you're solo consulting. You can only take on so many clients. I learned pretty quickly within those projects that a lot of the people that were hiring me just had a bandwidth issue in their marketing department. It was one of two scenarios. They had one or two marketers that were very task driven, but not strategy driven, or it was the opposite, that they had really high level marketers, good strategy, solid team, but they were launching so many things. It was just causing fatigue and friction. So that was a role I filled.
Okay, welcome to the Digible Dudes Podcast. I'm David.
I'm Reid.
Reid, today we have Janet Rosseth on, who runs Cadence Marketing Solutions. And man, she's been a friend of ours for, well, it may have been year one of the company. It was definitely early. It was our first trip out to Minneapolis when we met her. And she's just been such a great supporter. Honestly, if she hadn't entered our lives, I don't know how Digible would have made it through, but she's been terrific for us.
Totally. In fact, I think she might be a friend of mine.
Oh,
not a friend of ours.
okay.
Okay. Do you know the movie?
No.
Well, I don't know if Janet's a movie buff, so she might miss that one too. That's from Donnie Brasco.
Oh,
so
yeah.
They introduce you as a friend of ours versus a friend of mine. Tells you the level,
Yeah. Of the mob.
Yes.
Yeah.
In this case, the Digible mob.
Yeah.
But yeah, whatever the deepest friendship can be is, I think, certainly the classification we have for her. And yeah, I think she's just an inspiration too, like for, a lot of the women in multifamily, so strategic, such a great networker, such great values, integrity. And it's just, our purpose, right, is half of it is to be a catalyst for progressive change. And I just think Janet is doing that. So she's a real trailblazer. She's done great things with her company. She's super progressive. She loves to learn. Obviously, God help her, she's listened to almost all of our podcasts. But it's just because she's a very curious person and she wants to help support positive change. So yeah, nothing but great things to say about her, and really happy to check in. It's crazy it's been as long as it has.
Yeah.
A year or two, right?
Yeah, I think it's been, you were saying, a year or two since she's been on the podcast, the Digible Dudes podcast. She did come out to the summit last year, and I know participated. I don't think was she on a panel last year?
She was on a panel, last year.
Okay.
Or meaning,
look at that.
Yeah, 23.
She contributed.
Yeah, I think that was God, it wasn't the tech stack. It was well, doesn't matter. Yeah. Shoot.
Well, what Janet's doing, so she had a consultancy that really focused on Minneapolis, then noticed the need in the market to have, and I'm just calling it a mastermind. That's what connects the most with me. But she's built now a community of marketers and a little bit beyond marketers, but folks in the industry that have an interest and need in marketing and want to hone their skills. She has built a new arm of the business that has that community can join, and they have several times a week. They have different meetups and communication channels, and they share templates with one another, so on and so forth. So this episode, we were interviewing about that, like the need that she saw in the market and what she's doing there. And then towards the end, we also get into the 6 type of working geniuses and how that can be applied. So first part of the episode is really focused on this new community that she's building out and what she's discovered there, and then we get into working geniuses. One thing I did want to mention, because we didn't cover it, I realized we didn't cover it in the conversation, but her consultancy had been focused really on um, uh, the Minneapolis market. The community can be from anybody in the country can join that community. So if you're not familiar with Janet or you're not in Minneapolis, it's good for you to get familiar with her. She's a great super connector. And then her content works across the nation. So it's not just Twin Cities.
Totally. And it sounded like there's a pretty decent spectrum of subscribers. So even though the sweet spot, similar to us, is the multifamily marketer and or some variation of that, she mentioned some people in leasing, that are lease up operators, et cetera. And that brings some additional perspective, which is always, appreciated, rounds things out, which I think is so important for marketers in this industry, is to better understand the full universe but you got to kind of crawl, walk, run. But I think also based on the content she shared, that there's also a nice, kind of spectrum there as well. If you want more of the advanced classes versus, some of the kind of easy tips and tricks to get started, if you're just getting into the marketing side of multifamily.
I wanted to ask you personally, Reid, have you ever joined through past lives, like some sort of industry or professional organization?
Can you spell
Well,
that
I'm
out?
like a similar sort of mastermind. I think of as smaller, but like what she's doing.
Um, no, not outside of like maybe outside of my market. Most of my time was in media. And
Yeah.
so the media companies I worked for would facilitate that, where it's like, and it might be outside of even the media company, but it was
Hmm.
always kind of brokered or, facilitated. So I don't know if that's like trying to expose the fact that I'm lazy and haven't sought more networks or self development. I'm kidding, kind of, but yeah, what's behind that question?
Well, I was more curious because my recent experience. So, even though Janet joked about dating herself, that when she started, there wasn't social media. I, as you're familiar, I really stay away from social media. It just didn't seem like something I was both didn't have an interest in. It also doesn't seem like it has a great positive impact on many people. I think there are things you can do to make it have a positive impact on you if you set up the right systems and rules, if you will, for yourself. But where I'm going with that is like LinkedIn is the most active I've been, but even the groups on LinkedIn, I have not been a big participant. I'm more of like a lurker, whether it's like a Google review, a Yelp review, or like a network on LinkedIn. I will lurk, I do not post. And it's just been this thing, I don't know, that I set in myself at the beginning, which is pretty common. They say that the stat I saw years ago was only 1% of people will ever end up commenting or engaging. And so you have 99% are lurkers like me, right? However, in the professional groups that I've joined starting last year, I find I'm a fairly heavy contributor. More about like calls and stuff. Like I'm not super engaged in like Slack channels or forums or things. So maybe it's more of the like reading and typing where it stops short for me versus if I'm joining via like a Zoom or something, then I find I'm heavily engaged, and I also try to be aware of not trying to just like give like just try to have my voice heard or anything. It's more of I find myself sharing more and sort of almost to set an example for others to share. Like I'll share issues or vulnerabilities or things. And so I was just wondering if you would have had the same experience, meaning the lurking versus the sharing, and in what context, what gets you out of it.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the choice of lurker versus peeper or stalker, as some
Yeah.
people refer to it. Um, I guess I fall in that camp as well. I um, I think one of the reasons for me, and Janet did touch on this a bit, so it'd be interesting to come back to this with her. But one of the things that she said was important to her is that people can ask questions and engage. Uh, and you're saying, that's actually pretty atypical, at least on LinkedIn. And I know it's a different setting, different form, so I'm acknowledging that. But um, podcasting has worked better for me, and I think for
Hmm.
you, because we don't have to write anything. We're not really stopping and slowing down. I love the interviews when we get to do this, but we can just kind of go, and it does scale. Versus when you create a more intimate or engagement based platform or setting, it's hard because you then end up with all these questions and people trying to interact. So that's always been the hard thing for me when I think about signing up and being part of networks and stuff. I mean, I know
Hmm.
people sometimes dread it when I come in to a presentation, or you do, the hole puncher,
Hmm.
as you say, but we both ask a lot of questions.
Hmm.
So I can't imagine being a part of some of these networks and just, like putting my emoji hand up.
Yeah.
Like, it's like that's just really hard for me. So I think that, yeah, maybe one of the reasons that I don't typically sign up and join webinars and things like that is I
Hmm.
just can't help it. I want to ask, I want to engage, and then I derail.
Yeah.
So that's yeah. But the podcast has been great, for us. I think it's the perfect medium for you and I, based on the way we like to communicate, share knowledge, pose questions, etc. But just not have to slow down and type out blogs or post things or respond as we go.
Yeah, I also think for me, I think it's more the fear of the judgment. If I give a response on social media and then I have some keyboard warrior come over the top,
Hmm.
and it's not that there is value in getting people that don't have the experience. It's kind of like the people that, I just believe there is some value there. However, many people, online are just, it feels as if they're the keyboard warrior. It's like, have you actually done this? It's the whole like criticism against many teachers versus, the person out doing the business or whatever. So I just struggle to have like it's almost like a trust score, right? From the person that's like, that's like posting to be like, all right, they have a high, trust score on this one or whatever, the experience score. So therefore I will listen. And again, it's not that there's no value in some of those others, but there's definitely it feels as if there's a lot of trolling, judgmental stuff that comes through, and that just feels like I don't need to get caught up in that.
There's a ton in that. And also funny, since we mentioned the podcast with Janet, Hidden Potential, a few references there, but he said, and I think you remember this, but the first woman to, or women's group of mountaineers to summit Everest were not successful in their first attempt. And the leader of that, group was kind of resigned to, we tried, we failed, move on. And it was because of these keyboard warriors or naysayers that actually weren't experts in mountain climbing or anything else that motivated her more, funny enough, than the people that she did respect or trust. And of course they weren't like dumping on her, but she took it as fuel and motivating to have these, the peanut gallery basically like casting stones at her. So I think some of it is just how you shape your perspective, and getting that feedback. And the other interesting thing about it is often people that are trying to build their brand invite those keyboard warriors. They love it because that's how they actually do build up more and more of a brand, is all these people are jumping in, taking shots, and they just, feed off each other. Not necessarily the way you or I would ever want to grow an audience, but in a lot of ways, that's a specific strategy.
What did you always say about radio friction?
Yeah, friction. That was for social media. That was that campaign I told you about back in Seattle, where it was like Seattle versus Portland. God, it was something to do with the Ford campaign, but there was friction between the two radio clusters and markets. And then right after that, we heard about one between New York and California on Empire State of Mind versus California by Tupac, which of those were the better song for like a coast. And just the explosion. It's like nuclear, like more friction you can build, the more engagement you get, and the further that content travels.
Well, not to get too far off because we're already running late for our next meeting, but that's also what I was doing some research on the history of media this weekend. And anyways, if you look back at the 1960s and the headlines that the New York Times had then versus the headlines now, and now they're far more frictiony, bombastic, grading, whatever, versus then it was kind of like, it felt, if you read those headlines, they feel so boring and dull. And it's, it was more of like, we're reporting the facts. And now it's like, we need clicks, therefore. And it's, it's just the business model, right? The more eyes, the more money you make. Therefore, it incentivizes sometimes the wrong behavior. It's the whole like, winter cyclone situation happening with friction. But
well, I'm very interested in that article or podcast.
Okay.
Because I was going to say yellow journalism is something that really took root in the late 1800s and then exploded, in the beginning of the 20th century. And isn't that some version of this that, but maybe not in the New York Times. But the big difference we all know now is that there's actually is the opportunity to comment, to click, versus how far they could take that or how they might approach that, when yellow journalism was just starting to explode. So the history of media and how it applies to multifamily. Don't ask me about the second part yet.
Yeah. All right. Well, we got to go. Thank you, Janet, for being on. And I think you guys will enjoy the episode. So appreciate it. Okay. We're here with Janet. Janet, I guess do you even call yourself founder, or do you call yourself CEO? What do you call yourself of Cadence Marketing Solutions?
I call myself founder and CMO of Cadence Marketing Solutions.
CMO. Okay, cool. Well, Janet, we love having you on. I think that this might be your third appearance on the podcast, or at least you've done many of these things for us, and we appreciate it. You've been really helpful for us over the years. But why don't you go ahead and introduce Cadence Marketing Solutions, and we'll get into it.
I would be happy to, and thank you for having me back. I love being a part of everything Digible does, and I would share the same sentiment that you've been so supportive of what we do as well. So happy to be here. I'm Janet Rosseth. I am founder and CMO of Cadence Marketing Solutions. We're based out of Minneapolis, but our small team is positioned all over the United States, one in Houston, one in Kansas City, and one in Boston. And we were born out of a long career in multifamily marketing. I spent 25 plus years within organizations leading marketing and sales functions. And I always say the halftime point in my career, I was 20 years in, and it felt like the right time to take a pause and reboot as a solo consultant at the time to just have an opportunity to participate in more of the tech solutions that were coming out at the time. Leverage what I had learned with other clients, other multifamily operators that I had networked with over the years, and just do something a little different that was on my own terms.
Yeah, thank you, Janet. And I don't know if we got this last time, but I don't know the answer to this as much time as we spent together. But how big of a leap was it for you? Because I feel like some people will like, oh, okay, I want to jump out on my own, start a consultancy, and they'll think about it for 10 years. Versus others are like, new year, new me. Yeah, just if you could give us that background.
That's a really good question. So I very clearly remember when I interviewed for my last corporate position, the CEO at the time asked me, where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years? And I said, I'm too loyal to any multifamily company to make another jump to another company. I would see myself consulting. And I don't think I realized the value that I had been building of all the networks I'd created over so many years. But when the time came, it actually just came to a head at a point where I just felt like I had run my time at that company after 7 years. I was finding myself having to only make decisions in a box that fit that organization. And I was just so curious about so many other opportunities that it felt a little bit like a light switch. I'd said it 5 years ago, but I made it all happen in about 3 months. It came to a culmination at NAA that year. I pulled a few people aside, ran through my business plan. They all agreed, go now. I came home that weekend, took my husband to dinner, put a 20-page business plan in front of him and said, your only answer is you go, girl, and pulled the trigger the next day.
Did you spiral bound this plan or just staple it, binder clip it for him? How much did you put into the presentation?
Not that much. And honestly, when I just reviewed it a couple months ago. And when I reviewed it, it was like, wow, I'm glad I didn't stick to that hardly at all.
Yeah.
I mean, it just like snowballed once 2020 hit and had so many opportunities to pivot and see areas of opportunity and run with them.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it never has gone that way. I remember I've written business plans for 3 different companies and none of them worked out the way I wrote them, but I still got a lot of value out of doing them, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like you get value out of doing the work, even if that's not the answer or the road you take. Well, anyway, so now Cadence, you guys were doing, I'd say got a lot of traction by holding events in Minneapolis where you'd bring different folks together for speaking and education. And then you were doing a lot of project-based work with management companies in the area.
Yeah.
And then more recently, you've moved into this, launched Cadence Run Club and might be, making some slight change of direction. So I'd love for you to speak about that.
Yeah, I'd be honored to. So backtracking a little bit, when it was just me consulting, you hit a bandwidth pretty quickly when you're solo consulting. You can only take on so many clients, can only take on so many projects. And I learned pretty quickly within those projects that a lot of the people that were hiring me just had a bandwidth issue in their marketing department. It was one of 2 scenarios. They had 1 or 2 marketers that were very task driven, but not strategy driven. And so they really only got done what was on that marketer's plate, but nobody was looking ahead and forecasting and identifying areas of friction or opportunity for the organization. So that was a role I filled, or it was the opposite, that they had really high level marketers, good strategy, solid team, but they were launching so many things all at once that it was just causing fatigue and friction within the ability to launch all that at once. So I was coming in on the side with some of those teams and quickly identified that there is just a lack of support for marketers in multifamily. And that's where we started to really develop a productized service model, and the Run Club community and the Cadence Connect sessions was when we realized how many times we said throughout the week, oh, you know who else is working on that right now? So-and-so. You should talk to them. I said that so many times a week that I finally just started putting people together in spaces, whether it was online or in person, so that people could just collaborate with each other. It's often not so much the tactic of marketing as much as it is the process and getting your arms around the position, pushing through areas that are challenging in terms of integrations or products that people are using that they don't have all the information behind the scenes to make it work the way they wanted it to work. People aren't left often opportunity to research new technology, new trends. So being able to lean on each other is really helpful. So that's where really in the last 3 years we productized, and we went to a role where I'm often saying we work on that which affects many instead of that which affects few. And we try to bring tools and resources to many marketers rather than one or two at a time that we're mentoring within a client. And out of all of our client work, we've really developed this little niche of onboarding technology. We have 2 clients right now that are onboarding AI. So we're seeing 2 different products in action and helping to develop that and solidify how it's going to operate for their leasing functions. We get our hands in a lot of different experiences, and we're able to bring that to the masses in Run Club.
Well, I don't think, and this is a very high compliment for you, at least coming from me, Janet. So when it doesn't feel like a compliment, just know that I meant it as one. It's a compliment, but I've never met a bigger superconductor connector than yourself. Like, you've connected more people. I mean, you're probably twice the volume of anybody else I've ever met. It's incredible the type of, breadth that I've seen you make with connections over the years. And so it makes total sense to me that you would be someone that would see this opportunity and somehow like turn it into a more official program. That said, other people would have been more shy maybe to do it, because it's almost like your secret sauce in a way. It's like, this is Janet's superpower, and now you're taking your superpower and turning it into, I guess you call it a community, or so maybe walk us through the exact what it looks and feels like today, and then the problem you're solving.
It's really flattering to hear you say that, because I don't think that I saw myself as this super connector years ago. I'm just genuinely a person who wants to lead people to more information faster and introduce people. And I never saw it as a superpower. But I went through kind of a process with my dad last year. My dad's an entrepreneur. He's a business owner. He was, not the most introverted guy when you met him, but when you put him in a room full of people, the man worked the room. It just was natural curiosity. He just loved introducing people to people. It wasn't for any other purpose than to just feel like he was connecting people. And I feel like I definitely got that trait. But, the first opportunity that we had to do this, like I told you, I just kept meeting people who should meet each other, and they weren't doing it on their own. And, I'm of the age where we didn't have, I'm going to completely date myself, but we didn't have all the social media when I came up in this industry. We had a couple of conferences a year that you could go to and meet people. And those were the spaces where I met people like Lisa Trozen and Kate Good and all the names of the industry that are, the all-star speakers. That's where you met people like that connected you. So that was how I built my network. And then fast track to the, influx of Twitter when it first came out. And I met people like Mike Whaling and Mike Brewer and Mark Julien and, some other big names that are very active. Christy Fickert. That's where some of us met for the first time, was on Twitter. And thank God for Mike Whaling. He always found a way to bring a community together. But I just got so much out of those relationships and was so flattered that people like that would give me the time of day to help answer silly questions that I had in Minneapolis and nobody else was around. There were 2 of us marketing multifamily in Minneapolis. There's now 60 to 80 people marketing multifamily in this market. So I really took it upon myself to create this group. And the very first Cadence Connect session was 2019, fall of 2019. And I took a shot and organized the whole thing. The sponsorship levels barely paid for my rate to show up at the event. And, I spent a lot on food and beverage and hoped that people would come. And I didn't realize, I don't know if you know the Twin Cities area, State Fair is a really big deal. Are you aware of this? Minnesota State Fair is a huge deal. And I didn't look at the date, and I landed it on the first day of the State Fair. And I thought for sure no one's going to show up. Oh my God, this is going to be bad. Everybody had RSVP'd, but I was like, they're all going to realize I did this on the first day of the State Fair. And every single person that RSVP'd showed up. We had a room of 65 people, 3 panelists that came to present on the topic that I wanted to bring to life, 3 sponsors, and it was just a resounding success. And people talked to each other and met each other. And it was like, okay, this needs to happen more often. So we had another one in the spring of 2020. It was the day before the lockdown. I think Christy Fickert was one of the sponsors. I think she just barely made it on a flight out of town. And we had such a good thing going. And then 2020 hit, and it was like, oh no, what are we going to do? We can't do the in-person sessions anymore. And so we brought it online and just kept running Cadence Connect sessions online once a month. And that just lent so easily into, there's a need for this. There's a hunger for this. There are people who want to come and be surrounded by other marketers and show up and ask questions and, understand how their peers are getting their arms around the role. And so from there, we developed into this run club, which lent well to the name of, we named the company Cadence after optimizing running and, the efficiency behind productivity. And Run Club just felt very natural that if you're a new runner or you're seasoned, but you've signed up for a race that might be just a little out of your reach, you seek out a running club and look to run with your peers. Maybe David doesn't. He just solo launches into 100 miles on a treadmill, but
Yeah, I don't run with many other people. It's pretty lonely, but I'm trying to get more.
yeah, that was really the concept behind Run Club. It's a group where you come and learn from and become better, and we become better together. And it's not born out of an initiative to gain more clients or more income for our business or our consultancy. It's born out of, we learn more when we're together and surrounded by other marketers. We learn so much every single time we get on screen with the members of our community. And it's just become fantastic. So we've defined the ideal member. We're not trying to be something for everyone. We're trying to be something for the ideal member. And I think you guys know how much I love Pat Lencioni. We modeled it after his ideal team player, humble, hungry, and smart. We want people who are humble that can come with plenty of experience or zero experience and find a way to share. We want people to come without ego. Whether you are a 20-year seasoned veteran, you're going to learn a thing or two. And we want people to come who are hungry, that they're resourceful, they're scrappy, they're gritty. They want to come and ask questions that they would have to wait otherwise for a vendor to respond or a Yardi guru to respond on, or they might have to wait to go to a conference to get access to some of the new conversations that are happening. And we want people who are smart, that realize surrounding themselves with this kind of community is going to provide opportunity and growth for them personally and professionally. So that's our ideal member. And we have slowly built this community. We launched it last year, 2023. We ran it literally free the entire year. That was partly on me because I wasn't thrilled with the platform that we launched it on. And until I felt like I could meet the value proposition, I didn't want to charge. So enter 2024 and we're on a new platform. We're getting great success and we're charging what I think is the most reasonable annual membership. You come, you get a 30-day trial. You can take advantage of everything you want to take advantage for 30 days and then decide if you want to put your credit card in and stay for the year, and then take advantage of everything we bring in a year. So it's been really great. We are probably 60 members deep, which doesn't sound huge, but every single Monday noon session, we have somewhere between 18 and 25 marketers and vendors who are influencing marketing and multifamily. And the conversation is just fantastic. Fantastic. It's the size where people are really comfortable coming and bringing their whole self to the session. I feel like if it got too big all at once, people would be shy.
So it sounds like it's an online community where you have weekly, I'll call them like almost like mastermind sessions.
Yeah.
What other kind of things have you found effective, I guess, in the group? Like, is it like courses or I don't know, templates for things, or just wondering if it's more. I mean, what all?
It is more. It is more. So we have a resource library where we house resources that help marketers just get the job done faster. Everything from a simple photography checklist that they can send out to their properties when they've got a professional photographer coming to, we've built a master ad tracking spreadsheet to manage all of the contracts that come along with managing multifamily, which I have to tell you that I think it was your last podcast with the founder of Roof.
Oh, yeah.
And what is his new product? I was blown away by that conversation.
Oh, the vendor management platform.
Yes, it was fantastic. It's on my list to reach out to him because we've been trying to build something very similar to that. I think he's definitely onto something.
It's not because I don't remember the name. It's because I'm trying to get people to listen to the episode so that they can.
Yeah, we all believe that.
I do think it's a great idea.
Anyway, we have a whole resource library to help marketers navigate faster to the tools they need. They don't have to reinvent them. And then we host a Monday session every Monday at noon, and that one always has a topic. So we tackle AI, we tackle new trends, new hot topics. We bring in guest vendors, experts on their subject, not to come and do a demo, but to come and introduce what their product is solving and what they're learning off of it. We also have just launched a couple of new series. One is called Lease Up Lab. So one Monday a month, we run a session that is very specific to the challenges that come with driving lease ups. Today, that session was all about organizing all the details. And we had a couple of folks come on, members who do quite a few lease ups. One was reporting in on affordable lease ups and how fast they move. And one was reporting in on multiple lease ups in their portfolio at once and just how they navigate and organize the process. We also just introduced a new series called Lessons with Leaders, where we bring in senior level marketers to talk about their experience of how their career growth happened and what they've learned along the way, how they've organized their role, how they lead people on their team. We often get into subjects about the challenges for a lot of marketers, and we have all the responsibility and accountability for changing behavior across the portfolio, but zero authority. Those folks don't report to us. So that's a hot conversation in Lessons with Leaders. That's been a fun one. And then on Fridays, we developed what we call water break. It's almost like a water stop on your marathon. It's a half hour, 10:30 a.m. on Fridays, and it has turned into a support group for marketers. It's almost hilarious at this point that everybody dials in and everybody just comes with like, here's my frustration for the week. You guys tell me what you think of it. Or here's something I just found and noticed, and I think I want to lead the rest of you to it. And the conversations are just astounding. The stuff that everybody shares that they're either struggling with and they get some support on, or they just found a cool new tool and cannot wait to share it with the group. So those are unrecorded, unscripted. There's no agenda for them. We just open them up and the conversation kind of goes off on its own, and they're fantastic. And then we also introduced workshops. So some we have pre-recorded modules. We have one that is specific to advanced level of leasing. And we have one that we recorded called Fast Track that takes new marketers or marketers who maybe have been in the role for a while but never quite got a chance to organize the role and get their arms around it. And it takes them through 7 self-guided modules on just what you got yourself into, how to organize all the components of the role, how to tackle pitching recommendations up through the executive team when you know that there's a need to solve something within the portfolio, but you can't quite get the buy-in. How to lead by influence when you don't have authority. A lot of really good self-guided modules there. And right now we are in the midst of our occupancy recovery workshop, which has been really popular. We take people through a 3-part workshop and they leave with a playbook essentially to roll out for their portfolio for all those watch list meetings or those properties that land on the hit list because they're not reaching their budgeted occupancy goals. We take them through and build a playbook around the components of all the, I call them holes in the bucket. Every time you plug one hole, another one leaks more. So we talk about, it's never just a lead issue. You don't come to marketing and just say, turn on more advertising. It's often further down the operations model in terms of whether or not your leasing team is converting or you're retaining residents and not losing people out the back door, or your reputation isn't playing a part in hitting those occupancy goals. And it's been nice. People have given us really great feedback on walking away with a playbook that their senior leadership team can all get on the same page with and quickly identify who plays what role when a property hits the watch list and what does your meeting cadence look like and what do you show up with to move the needle.
Yeah, I love it. There's so much opportunity there to connect with other people, learn from their experience. And that's what I love about this concept of joining some sort of a mastermind. I mean, Reid and I just in the last year have started to keep our eyes open for what makes sense for us. And I joined 2 last year, one for business owners and one for like digital agencies. And it's been incredibly impactful for me personally, just to be able to speak with some folks in my space, and then in the other case, speak with folks outside of my space to just learn from their mistakes and their experience, and that's been really helpful. And then to be able to give back in the same way. But yeah, I don't, Reid, I would love to toss it to you because we don't usually make it this far in before I toss it to you. So now I just have no segue for you. I'm just giving it to you.
Yeah, I was about to set a timer. I was like, this could be a record. I have, I think now 23 questions from the first 15 minutes there, Janet. So trying to figure out where to start. What you mentioned some of the topics, there's so much that you covered. So this is, I think, what probably is the fun, but also the challenge when it comes to entering in this industry, trying to learn it, accelerate it. Then you come across this great platform and community. How you kind of set the curriculum or help manage that for them. It sounds like there's a lot of almost an all you can eat buffet where there's all these different, I guess workshops, trainings, things like that.
Yeah.
David and I have both flirted with the idea for several years now of Digible University, so that it was kind of go at your own pace and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering maybe you could start with what the typical profile is. I mean, we get that it's a multifamily marketer most likely, but if you could kind of sketch that out a little bit more for us. And then how do you manage or help them manage the experience,
Yeah.
of kind of onboarding. And then
Those are great
is
questions.
there is there even an offboarding? What does it look like as they get further in? Or is it just like the value of kind of maintaining the community? So
Yeah.
there's a little bit of a rapid fire, but
Those are great questions. So who's the right ideal member? We have marketing managers, marketing coordinators, so very tactical marketers who are just set out to do the job, but they gain a lot of opportunity on just understanding what they should be looking at in strategy and maybe, forecasting and identifying areas of opportunity that no one else is looking at within their organization. Sometimes we have those marketers who bring in senior leaders into a certain session and ask for, a guest pass, or in 2023, we just left it wide open. We had a lot of senior regional managers or execs, even a few CEOs that dropped into sessions that were very particular to maybe we had a conversation about centralization or leveraging AI and the conversations that are a little more strategic. We have some leasing managers that have been just an awesome addition to the group, very active in the group, because there's a bridge that has to happen between marketing and leasing. And those leasing managers and leasing trainers are really impactful in making sure that both components are really meeting each other's needs. Those have been great. We have a few regional managers that are tasked with marketing. I'm sure you guys have come across these organizations too that don't actually have anyone in the marketing seat.
Never.
It's like, oh, here's a regional manager who doesn't mind signing marketing contracts. We'll just have them run the marketing.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have that on occasion. Onboarding, it has been really nice coming onto this new platform in 2024. When we left 2023 with the free platform, we had about 155 people that had come through Run Club, which seems like a small number still, but that was a very high volume. And when we looked back, there were some people that came once and didn't come back again, or checked in but never really engaged. The platform that we're on now, we moved people over one by one that were very engaged, and we made sure we were able to onboard them. And that's why we like to keep it small, because our team, there's 4 of us who stay very engaged. And when somebody comes and registers a profile with us and we don't see them come out within the first couple of weeks, we actually personally reach out and make contact and just check in on, have you not seen a topic that's engaging? Are you a little worried about coming out and not knowing anybody? We'll introduce you. Come on Friday when it's really low key. It's easy to meet people. What's going to help you take that next step? Or is it a matter of we're not hitting sessions that work in your time schedule? Do we need to move things around and offer them a little bit? We are just genuinely committed to being a good resource and a good steward of this community for the marketers and vendors that come out. And then we do have vendors. We have some fantastic people that have joined. Mike Whaling makes an appearance once in a while. He comes out as an expert quite frequently too. Grady Newman's been out quite a few times. Anthony Pantanucci's been out. We have a lot of the same vendors that all of you work with, right? Some of them that I met at Digible Summit have been out, and Christy Fickert's been out quite a few times. They really love to come and listen in on sessions when they're able to and hear what the operators have to say and what other vendors have to say about given topics. Maybe it's, applicant fraud. We had, oh man, that was a big audience when we talked about applicant fraud. Centralizing leasing efforts and how do you do that has always drawn a big group. We did one with, Chris from Authentic came out, Chris Arnold, and talked us through our first lease up lab. And he really talked to us about activating lease ups, signage, and what factors do you need to consider. So we've had some great interaction between both vendors and marketers. And a lot of those folks come back and listen in on more sessions.
So how far out then do you guys schedule, I guess, the content? We've been working on this ourselves. We're trying to get, I think what Trevor's trying to get a couple quarters out. But there's so much to get to, and then, certain trends start to flare up, or there's some feedback that you might be getting that you're really excited to kind of educate or share. So yeah, how do you approach the content calendar?
I'd love to tell you that we are half a year out on content, but in honesty, our best sessions come at the recommendations of our members. In fact, just in our session today in our Lease Up Lab, there were 2 notes dropped on, hey, Janet, this should be a future topic. So I take those and add them in and go find the right guest speaker to come and join us for that session. But we're scheduled out to March right now. We have repeatable concepts through the 4 Mondays in a month. So first Monday is usually lessons with leaders. We bring in a senior marketer. We've got a format for that. Second Monday usually taps into something having to do with the market, the state of the market. Third Monday is generally trends, and the fourth Monday is Lease Up Lab. So we have a general rolling theme. So if you wanted to make sure that you are at every single Lease Up Lab, you could just schedule out the last Monday of every month. And then we have, the occasional thrown in session, thrown in workshop. We had a really great forum conversation about workflow systems and ticketing systems that everyone was participating on, operators and vendors. And it almost came down to Monday versus Asana. So kind of threw an idea into that one on like maybe on some Wednesdays, we just need to throw in a dig deeper session on some of these forum conversations that got a lot of play. January, we got a ton of conversation around non-optional fees. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I bet, especially with Minneapolis. I was going to say, I'm going to throw this back to David, but the value proposition, there's a lot of different avenues to get value from the Run Club and from Cadence. Do you take that, I guess, a step further, or are you ever asked, like, very specifically, you know, I've been tasked with improving our performance by X%. Like you mentioned lease ups, like leasing velocity, those kinds of things. And how do you handle that? So if somebody's questioning whether they should like get a subscription and what really do they get back, obviously they get networking, they get
Yeah.
education. But I'm thinking if I'm the CEO or the COO and I have a marketing manager coming to me saying that they want a subscription,
Yep.
I'm looking for, maybe a little bit more quantifiable. Like,
Right.
so what should I expect back then if I go ahead and support the subscription? So I don't know if you've been confronted with that yet, but just, kind of more specific value points or propositions,
Yeah, we have been confronted with that a little bit. It's hard for education budgets to open up, and I would consider this part of an education budget. But also, most marketing departments or marketing solo folks report up to directly to the president or CEO, someone who doesn't necessarily have the time to nurture and cultivate that role, nor is it the language they speak on a daily basis. So that I think is the biggest value proposition right there, is that we deliver a community that helps your marketer grow. Essentially, what I've been coming to terms with saying is we optimize marketing departments. Where there is inefficiency, we bring efficient resources. We bring you to, tools and resources very quickly. We know a lot of vendors. We know a lot of marketers. We can point. It never fails that somebody just throws a question in there on, hey, does anyone know a tool that does this? And bam, there's the tool that does that, or the person that you should talk to. So the resources alone are worth it. And I like to also say, the amount that we charge for Run Club, and in a lot of months, we offer discounts and opportunities to join in ways that are budget friendly, is about the same amount as attending the 2-day apartment association workshops, which do not seem to deliver great tracks for marketers. Leasing, yes. Property management, yes. Marketers, not so much. So it's really the same you're probably spending on all other roles in the industry to have additional education, but marketers just don't really get that. And instead of being a 2-day or a one, session, we are 365 days a year, weekly education and daily forum opportunities.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Well, I think this is a fun discussion, Reid, because we've always promoted education here at Digible, but it hasn't been formalized because in the early years we didn't have a lot of the free cash to send people to seminars or whatever. But it also strikes me it's really interesting that, like, when you're often interviewing for your job, you're like, okay, I got my MBA or I got my whatever, right, Master's of Finance, and then once you join a job, many companies are hesitant to then like provide additional training because they're like, well, we hired you, so you should be training yourself, right? So I just love this, like, a quick discussion here on as you're saying, like, what's the ROI of training? What have you talked to our team about when they're asking for training budgets?
Yeah, I mean, we generally support, and part of it, was just having the means to do that. But we have now a Slack channel, and we include in our weekly roundup self-development, because we encourage that as much as we're trying to financially like help with like, coaching and employee development, all this stuff. Maybe that's part of why it's hitting me is we don't necessarily baseline. So it's like somebody's skill set level or output, and then say, okay, as a result now of 6 months of manager development or third party, meaning like a career coach or a subscription, to a community, what the payback was. And it's not to seem like, we're consumed, with
Yeah.
ROI, but I think it's an important question to ask.
Yeah.
And frankly, it could also help a ton as far as the marketing of a consultant firm. My sister's been a consultant in nonprofit for 25 years, and she got a little miffed with me, but we were able to laugh it off over Christmas. I saw her and I started hitting her with some similar questions. And I was just like, how do you, quantify for just the value that you're bringing to your clients? And she was like, well, it's mostly strategy, Reid. It's
Yeah.
strategy, it's process. I'm helping them be more efficient. I'm getting them to think differently, more intelligently about how they operate their businesses. And I'm like, yeah. And not that, I mean, I know her and I'm sure she does a great job at that. But I was like, so then do you do like an intake, or does
Mhm.
the company, so that you do set kind of where we sit today, and then when they're done with the engagement,
Yeah.
tens of thousands of dollars later, that they're like, there it is right there.
Yep.
It's not
Yeah.
just that we were smart to hire Kimberly Wyckoff. It's really easy for them to see the value in it. That becomes incredibly powerful, for referral business, and
Yeah.
also for operators that are not going to spend the time or don't, speak the language or can't mentor. It makes it so much easier if there's this quantifiable. So
You're so right. Early on, I developed when I was just consulting, and it was people would come to me and say, I don't even know what I need. Like, can we just sit down and talk? I don't even know what I need. I developed what's called our roadmap. And it was really kind of a let's take you through all the components of marketing across your organization and identify where you think you're strong, where you think you're weak, and where you're just not even touching it. And from there, let's prioritize which areas you think should be on your radar. And then let's identify a time frame each quarter on how you want to get from point A to point B. And then if you choose to hire us on to help you get there, fantastic. If not, we've got these other solutions that you can come and bridge the gap with till you're ready to do that. For several of our clients, we did that early on and we've stayed on with them for multiple years. And we try to deliver, once or twice a year, a mile marker where we kind of say, look where you've gotten within this roadmap, where we started out and where we are now and what you've tackled and what you've grown in, what you've achieved in that time frame. But yeah, it's hard to quantify. And there is an immense amount of scope creep when you're consulting with clients. You start out on one project and it's like, what would you do with this? Like this scenario just crept up and all of a sudden the thing you were hired for is tabled and you're on to something
yeah,
different.
totally. David has talked a lot over the last several months about outcome statements. And it's interesting. You don't have to share if you don't want to, just about how you kind of flip that upside down with the Tony Robbins stuff about not being as focused on the outcome statement and more on I think the why or the purpose inside of it. Not meaning that you're not still focused on outcome statements, but my point here is how interesting that could be if it's like as part of an intake, we'd like to see some outcome statements from you. And so
Mm-hmm.
that will really help us, close the gap and as far as value and knowing that we've moved you along. And then ultimately how that translates back to, the company that you work for. Because we get asked that at the summit, every trade conference you go to, it's like, what's actionable? What are you going to take back? How can we make sure that we know there was value to sending you to
Yeah.
that conference? But I don't think anybody's really figured it out. And part of it's just because it's hard and it's also a moving target. So,
Well, with a lot of consulting agency, it really is a matter of, the first step is identifying where your pain points are. Where's your pain? And then developing how are you going to solve it? And then how are you going to sustain it? So we always say we don't want to come in as a consultancy and be your marketing department. We want to help you optimize your marketing department, and then we'll step away and you can sustain it with things like Run Club or workshops or Cadence Connect sessions. You stay tapped in with the Cadence team and with all of our peers that we've surrounded ourselves with, but you don't necessarily need to continue with us as your marketers.
Yeah, I think, I'm still focused on outcome statements, but with also knowing the why behind the outcome. So I think it's important to know the purpose of, because you can easily get away from it if you don't document both. But I think this conversation about education and self-development is interesting to me. Jan, do you have any sense, or if you just need to take a gut check, I'm okay with that, on how many of your members pay for it themselves versus it's covered by the company?
That was one of my questions. So I could mark that off. Yep.
Yeah. Honestly, I've had quite a few ask me, do people pay for it themselves or does the company pay for it? And I was a little surprised when I first got that question asked, because I guess I was always blessed working in companies that valued that education. But right now, current members, I only know of 2 that paid for it themselves. And they're 2 people who are actually between roles right now.
That's interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think for Reid and I haven't, and maybe it's just our space, but our space doesn't often do that. They don't often like pay for memberships of things, or conferences. Like maybe conferences is something they'll be more likely to do, but as far as like these continued education type stuff, it's not as common. So that's really encouraging about the space, that they have the budgets to do that.
It is honestly affordable enough that if a marketer really wanted to grow personally and didn't feel like their organization would support it, it definitely is worth coming out and, biting it off on your own and paying for it, and surrounding yourself by all these marketers who might help lift your career a little bit and help you have those conversations and pitch it differently.
Well, one of the things, I guess, do you want to ask more about that before I move on to Working Geniuses?
Yeah, I hope this connects enough that you won't be annoyed with me. My question is on recall. So with all the different things that they get exposure to and learn about and experience, one of the challenges we found, which I assume very much for what you're trying to do, is the recall and the application. So we had an incredible session, was a year or 2 ago, with Sam Scrobot.
Yeah.
She did an amazing job with our client services team, particularly just trying to help them with the language and some things outside of their day-to-day, but that are the day-to-day of the industry. And if we quiz them on those sessions, I'm just being fair, because I know if I were them, it's like, and then the very next month, I think Anthony was here at Digible talking to them about ILSs, and then the next month we're talking about ChatGPT. So there's just so much to consume. I didn't know if you had, I guess, a formula or approach with people that are subscribers to help them with recall and application, so that they don't lose these super special, like, valuable lessons 6 months later.
It's both a great question and a great recommendation. At the very basic right now, every Monday session is recorded. So every member has access to all of the previous sessions all the way back to launch in January of 2023. So at any time, they can go back and rewatch some of those sessions, which I understand. Like, no, who goes back and rewatches a 60-minute session? That's a lot to consume. But we do recap the sessions. So our team takes some, quick notes, recaps some of the highlights of the session, and then some of that often ends up on our blog, on our website too, which we've just reintroduced to. We kind of took a hot break from blogging and then realized, this is actually a really good place to put this information. So, we leave a lot of bite-sized pieces along the way, whether it's, a social media post or it's a forum conversation that starts. I'm guessing there's probably a forum conversation that started out of the Lease Up Lab session today after the session, because there were just so many tips dropped. And I think, honestly, one of the biggest values of Run Club, of coming to those sessions, is the resources that our members drop in the sideline chat. One of the Lease Up speakers today dropped a recommendation for a digital asset management tool that she uses. And I mean, that link fired up in the chat and multiple people went to look at it. We've had conversations about DAM tools before, and always looking for a better one that fits the budget of multifamily. That's where value comes from. And those things get posted in the forum. So there is recall. And people have honestly come back and said, hey, somebody dropped a stat in that session last month about that topic. Does anyone remember what it is? And somebody always remembers or can go find it.
Well, I could go on, but I want to let you get to 6 types of Working Genius.
Yeah, well, I think, Janet, I know that you got certified in 6 types of Working Genius, and it's also, Patrick, Now you said his name different. I say Lencioni. What do you say?
I think I say Lencioni.
I say Lencioni too, but Lencioni sounds more.
I don't know.
Well, it's probably true to his roots. Is what I'm
Yeah,
trying to.
it's got more oomph to it too.
Yeah.
The reason I bring it up is because you talk about how you've been mentioning you do all these. There's all these workshops and education things. Has Working Genius made its way in there?
It has. So I had the opportunity when they very first launched Working Genius. It was just coming into 2020. And Pat and his group, the Table Group, started hosting consultancy sessions for consultants who were trying to pivot during 2020 and, really started leaning into this model and how can you utilize it. And I ended up having my entire team take it. And then our entire business is structured around everybody's working genius. So the roles that we all play, and every time that I need to rework our org chart and figure out what the big projects are next, that's the first place I start is what's everybody's working genius? What role are they going to play in this project launch? And it really came to fruition as just an invaluable tool when I started doing the roadmap with these clients who were trying to figure out where do we even go to catch up. We have a lot of clients who are very behind on marketing and technology and needed to catch up. And we'd do this roadmap, and then it would be a real challenge to try to figure out how are you going to tackle all of this within your organization. So I started bringing in Working Genius at the bare minimum of having everybody take the assessment and just identifying there are a lot of people who have marketers in place and they're expecting strategy out of them, but their genius is tenacity, which is a whole different working style. So I really started just leaning on Working Genius for client projects so that we could align better and tackle projects from an elevation status and a productivity model. And it's been so fantastic. So when they started the facilitator and certification program, I could hardly wait to get in there and get certified. And you guys have taken the assessment, you know a little bit about it, but I'm telling you, the certification program, I have consumed every single podcast that they've ever posted on Working Genius, and that program went so much deeper than I was expecting into the model and its capabilities. It was just phenomenal.
Yeah. I don't know that we've actually covered it on this podcast. So why don't we quickly just give the highlight, and then I think it'd be really interesting to quickly walk through what you see as the most common gap with marketing teams.
Yeah.
So let me describe it real quick, and then you correct me. But the way there's a lot of these personality tools and tests and things that exist, whether it's strength finders or what have you. Why I connected with Pat Lencioni's, Working Geniuses is because
It's Lencioni.
You now know for sure.
Yeah, I'm positive.
All right, Lencioni.
Because Janet said so.
Okay.
I'm terrified that you're believing me.
Well, you've been listening to the podcast, so at some point he must have introduced himself. So I trust you.
He does. And there's more, quarterly Pat sessions. So I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to say I'm right. All right, go ahead, David.
Yeah. So he basically, I think, made it more simple to digest for me. I struggled with the other ones, whether it's strength finders or what's the ENTJ, what's that thing? Myers-Briggs.
Oh, yeah, I guess.
Myers-Briggs.
You mean the disc?
There's the disc, there's also an Enneagram and
Enneagram. Yeah. Anyways, those I've always struggled to quickly get them. And then to if Janet's like, I'm a XYZ, I'm like, okay, I can barely remember my own, let alone what hers means in relation to me. So I felt I experienced this as an easier way to figure out how you work with other personalities more just swiftly. Anyway, so the 6 working geniuses there are 6 things that all of us have to do within our work. And the way I like to think about it you have 2 things that you're a genius at, or that you can do basically all darn day. There are 2 things that you're competent at. And then there are 2 things that if you spend a lot of time doing, you will get really frustrated and burn out quickly. And so, Janet, I'll let you then go through the categories as far as the type of what the 6 categories are. But soup to nuts, every project needs parts of all 6 categories done, and you can't. No one person is a genius at all 6.
Right on. Yes, that is correct. And the benefits behind this model, like you said, there are a lot of personality tests out there, but what I really loved about this one is it's 20% personality model, but it's 80% productivity. So once your team has all come together and taking it and you know each other's personality style, you apply the other 80% to your productivity around projects or work or productivity, and it is just a game changer. So the 6 types are, it goes in order of the word widget. So wonder, invention, discernment, galvanizing, enablement, and tenacity. And those 6 things, everybody is made up of those 6 parts. But you're right, David. We have stronger points that are our geniuses, and those give us joy and a lot of energy to work in that zone. And they come very naturally. It's kind of our natural gift. And then we have frustrations where if you spend too much time in that area or you have to even tackle a project in that area, it's your frustration or it just makes you want to crawl out of your skin. You hate doing that kind of work. It just isn't your wheelhouse. And then the middle 2 are just your competencies. We work in all 6 areas all the time, but once you take the assessment and learn your geniuses, it's just eye-opening on self-realization of why you get frustrated in certain types of projects. And then really it comes down to altitude of projects. So based on the word widget and how that falls down, WI is at the top of the altitude of productivity, and that's the ideation mode. And then DG is in the activation mode and ET is in the implementation mode. So once you know your style, where your geniuses fall, you can identify whether you are really comfortable in a very high level ideation mode of work, or you get your complete satisfaction out of dotting the I's and crossing the T's in the implementation. Those are the people that take things across the finish line. So, I'll just give you my working geniuses. This was eye-opening for me. I'm a DG, which when we talked earlier about I'm a natural connector of people, that's my galvanizing. I get really excited about galvanizing and rallying people and just getting people together around common subjects or common goals. And my D is the discerning, which serves me really well in consulting because I very quickly and easily see the gray area or opportunity. I don't take things at face value super easily. I look beyond it and see where the holes are. I can see through the trees is what I sometimes like to say. It works well for quick assessment of where clients are at when we have our first conversation. But my frustrations came as no surprise to me. T, tenacity, is a frustration. I absolutely cannot stand the final details of projects. I mean, you give me all the little write up that scenario, or I can lead the session all day long, but if you ask me to recap it, it's going to take me a week because I don't like that final tactical stuff and the accounting behind running a business and the tactical pieces. I just want to crawl out of my skin. My team knows that on final days of the month, like right now, I have to literally, like Reid, we talked about this earlier, I have to go get my Welch's fruit snacks and, an actual Coke and all of my tools to cut through the tenacity work behind month end of the business.
What I like about this system is with other systems, my experience was you can learn how your type should interact with other types.
Yep.
But what was easier in this way, maybe just the language around it for me, was the book speaks a lot towards borrowing. So it's like in this case, like UI and Reid, all of us have the frustration around tenacity. So we would need to borrow from someone if we might want to borrow from someone instead of us doing tenacity. So instead of you having to eat your fruit snacks or whatever in Coca-Cola, you might borrow someone and say, could you help accomplish this tenacity? It's part of your job, but yet since it's not a genius of your job, maybe someone can help you, and then vice versa. You can trade basically. Could you help me with this? And I help you with that.
Well, and it turns out it is somebody's genius and they love it. I used to hate to delegate the tenacity work to anyone on my team because I thought they must hate it as much as I do. Not so. There are people that just love it, love getting that across the finish line and finishing things out and checking the box done.
Yeah, I still struggle with it, frankly. Like all of us can end up doing it at times, but you end up projecting like, who the heck would want to wash my car? Or who the heck would want to do this? And it's like, no, some people really, whatever, they get into it. Just because you don't like it doesn't mean you can't offload it to somebody.
Yeah. So the nice thing about the model too is that once you take the assessment, so if you take a whole team within your organization and they take the assessment, You can drop them into the team model, and it'll show you where everybody's genius and frustrations are, and you can easily see where there might be holes. So wonder is a space where there's often a lot of holes. Wonder is a little bit less tendency within people to be their genius. And that's an area where everybody's got it. It's just, for some of us, it doesn't lean naturally. So when you don't have that category of wonder, it's easy to take the team and say, okay, so in this particular meeting or in this particular instance, we're having a, traction calls it a level 10. Working Genius calls it an ideation meeting. Maybe it's a, forecasting and planning meeting. You might bring in your team and say, okay, we're going to have to W right now. So let's get out of our D&G or our ENT and let's ask some W questions, and you can give yourself prompts and get through that. But, when it comes to the productivity, when you're going to launch a new technology or a new business product or whatever it may be, when you line your team up and you line the initiative up by that ideation phase, activation, and implementation, and then everybody's genius, it's really easy to position everybody in the right places.
Well, I have a couple of questions, and I'm going to flex my eye a little with you. But I'll start with, do you see this as more valuable to, let's say, a team leader or the IC? Or do you see it as there's equal value? Because if I'm leading a team, I'm trying to find that balance, make sure people are borrowing where they should, that we're fully optimizing based on our strengths, competencies, and frustrations. And then, of course, me as an individual, the better I get to know myself, probably the smarter I'm going to work. So I don't know if, you feel like it's fairly equal, or you see more benefit to maybe the manager or the individual?
I think it's often the leader who is going to lean back into it on a regular basis. But once the whole team has assessed, knows their own geniuses, and knows the team, it's remarkable how everyone shows up a little differently in meetings. Because you bring your geniuses and you recognize those around you, and you can easily call out things that are happening in the meeting to get back on track. So, if your entire team knows what your style is, I'm going to pick on you for a second, Reid. You're an IG. This is one of the most talked about pairings in the Working Genius certification program, because IGs are double disruptors. So some geniuses are disruptive, some geniuses are responsive, meaning they take the work that's being brought to the table and respond to it versus creating new ideas. You're a double disruptor. And when you've got a team that is, I'll take Nicole, for example, an ET, she's at the implementation phase, you're at the ideation stage. You show up differently around each other, and being able to say, okay, I'm going to let Reid, innovate for a minute here. And then I've got to put my enablement cap on and be able to take good notes on how exactly we're going to get this across the finish line. It's just this incredible awareness of understanding how to let people's geniuses really breathe and then take them and move them through the project. Because I would get frustrated if people started asking me questions about the little details when I'm still up here in ideation mode. Like, let me dream for a minute. Don't ask me all those questions.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I learned this years back, and there's value to it, but the other part of this was not, I guess, encouraged, which is how to manage up to somebody. So that's very common. And I was told, as I started to, get more senior positions, make sure you're clear about that. It's a good thing to shortcut that so that they understand you. But what about managing down? And that's where I like the kind of bidirectional, I guess, value of working types of geniuses. So if we onboarded somebody, instead of just get to know your manager, like, this is what I don't like or I like, it's like, the sooner that I can recognize what, your strengths are, we both benefit. So, flexing the eye for a minute, and this is, I don't know if it's criticism, but it's a pretty serious question for me about 6 types of working geniuses. David knows I've been on the self-awareness train for a long time. I put a lot of value in that, not meaning that I'm getting it right myself, but a lot of people don't. And so when you do these types of kind of behavioral or profiling, what if you're not right? So there's not really a kind of cross reference. I don't know if you've already incorporated anything to deliver that. But that's the benefit. And there's criticisms also for 360 feedbacks, but it's like, here's what I think about myself, but does David see me the same way? And so openly, when we started sharing and first went through this, I was not getting it right for everybody. I was sure David was going to have a W. I mean, it wasn't that I was shocked, but he helped me understand a little why he wasn't a W. But almost anybody that meets him says David's like the most curious person they've ever met in their life, because he asks so many questions and great questions. And so it just seemed obvious. So I point that out because, if there's often a variance, then I think you've got to get at that. And that's where I think a cool addition to a workshop with six typing working geniuses could exist, where it's like, hey, let's first, before we, go through the assessment, let's go ahead and guess. Let's see. And then I think you open up the door to some really interesting dialogue where it's like, I could have sworn you were going to be that, but you're not. And that's your own opinion of yourself, but you're not really exuding that or reflecting that, to the people around you. And then I think there's all sorts of kind of opportunities, coaching, better understand each other. But my guess is, Janet, if you're not certified and don't really get this, and you just take it at the surface, that you would have a ton of deltas and variances like within any organization as far as what we assume somebody is versus what they really are.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and, bringing up W again, like W, we move so fast at work. We all just move at the speed of light and it's never fast enough. And W's need some room. They need some space. They need some opportunity to develop their thoughts. And David, my guess is, you're a discerner. You're a DI, right? So you already are at the top of the ideation and activation stage. My guess is that on a daily basis, you naturally lean into that innovation and discerning because you probably need to show up and discern all day long. But given just a little bit of room to breathe, you for sure W. You're in wonder mode. So it's not far off. And for a lot of people, their third item doesn't necessarily show up as a genius. It might be a really strong competency, but it's probably neck and neck with the others.
How I explained it to myself when we first went through the test was that I also get very frustrated if all we do is talk about something and don't take action. So I don't mind wondering for a long time if I know we'll do something about it, but it really irks me if we talk about doing stuff and nothing happens. And so that's why I took it to be that maybe my wonder wasn't a genius, but was more of a competency because I need that action. Otherwise, I will. Man, I can even already feel myself getting frustrated right now thinking about talking
You probably loop
about
yourself
stuff.
through wonder and discernment. You start to wonder and then you discern it and move it along.
Yeah, totally. I definitely do that with short term versus long term, and 100%. Well, I don't want to miss before we run out of time. I did want to hear what I'm asking you to do a little bit of generalization here, but with marketing teams, what do you usually see for working geniuses? And if you want to break it down by position, that's okay. But I know you'll have to generalize it. But really, what are the biggest gaps so that maybe some listeners could take something away from that?
Well, you would think that you could call out a position and say most marketers fall under these geniuses, but that doesn't actually really happen. I think teams in general are made up of all types. All types of work need all six geniuses, and all people are made up of all six geniuses. So I will say that I'll reverse that on you, David, and tell you what is often lacking in departments is the galvanizing piece. And galvanizing, while people sort of see it in the immediate basis as, oh, it's a cheerleader, and I can show up and cheerlead. You might be able to show up and deliver a kickoff, but being able to continuously rally and galvanize people around a common goal and get them past the pitfalls and continue to nurture the why behind the what and engage them in a way that draws them out and makes them want to come with you on a journey of launching yet another tech stack. That galvanizing piece can be really critical. You can launch things all day long, but if there's not a galvanizer on the team that's going to draw people through it, that's where things can fall into what I call the dreaded launch and leave it syndrome. People move on to the next thing and haven't necessarily galvanized others around making it all the way through the journey.
I can see that. I mean, I could, like, my broad strokes, I thought you were going to flip it on me, but my broad strokes are, a lot of, I feel that a lot of people are hired in the marketing position because there's all this, like, if you start off as like a marketing assistant, uh, then you are typically someone that's got to clean up. You have to be tenacious because you have to get all the little things done. That can make you really effective at that role. But then in this industry, as you move up the chain and you become a marketing manager and then a marketing director, you may need to flex other things because maybe you can't be, it's not as productive to be tenacious because they expect you to be meeting with clients and wowing clients and getting those, owners to decide to pick this management company because of that vision you had. And so you may have to start borrowing from other folks if you are really that tenacious person, but you don't have as much of that wonder or invention. Um, and then obviously there are times that you need discernment to know which vendor to pick or what, tech stack to be recommending, yada, yada, yada. So I just think it's valuable to realize, yeah, and know where you're at and maybe what's expected of you, and then figure out, like, how do you fill the gap, so that you don't get stuck trying to do your frustration.
Especially when you're a 1 or 2 person team and you know what your geniuses are, but the others aren't represented. You do almost have to come into projects and productivity in terms of, okay, there's 6 geniuses that need to happen, and I'm going to always lean into these 2. But in this particular phase or this particular, strategy meeting, I've got to figure out how to bring the others that aren't represented. So either you, draw from other people across other departments, or maybe you draw from property managers or leasing agents that might be a little more innovative to help create yourself a forum or a group. But it's just that self-awareness of understanding how you show up most naturally and drawing out the parts that you don't show up as naturally.
Or you could draw from your Cadence network.
We are well represented. Oddly enough, I have the other 3 people on my team that are very, very active are all 3 T's. So whenever I'm feeling guilty that I can't get stuff across the finish line, I just acknowledge it. And I'm like, you guys just go tee this up. This was a brilliant session. I'm going to just back up and let you guys go tee this up. But we also have 2 of us are discerners, 2 of us are galvanizers, and we've got a lot of enablement and tenacity. So stuff can get across the finish line.
Yeah, I'm just laughing at myself and David because I know within probably 0.25 seconds right now when he's going to drop something like that, like either a little Staley humor or a little, backdoor angle or whatever. And my girls are now on to me for that.
Right.
So I used to be able to be like, girls, come here. I got to talk to you about something. And I could kind of throw anything in and surprise them. And now they are so in tune with my delivery and my tells or whatever that they're like, oh, he's joking, or oh, this is going to be an awesome surprise, or oh, we're actually in trouble. So
Interesting, Reid. Your girls are young still, right? How old are they?
Well, they're getting older for sure. I got twins that are 13 now, and then my youngest is 10.
So they probably could take the assessment. I think he's supposed to be coming out with a model for teens too, but I had my whole family take it. That was a moment of, I'm just going to say, like, regret in parenting that I didn't know these things earlier, because I roll with the punches and I just take things as they come so easily. But both of my daughters are more aligned with the enablement and tenacity, and they like scheduled things. They like to know what's coming. They like to dot the I's and cross the T's. And I run a little too wild for them. So it was sort of this eye-opening moment of like, wow, I totally understand why our vacations go the way they go. Or, why everybody gets frustrated with me when I throw stuff on them last minute. Like, I thought everybody rolled the way I do. Just so cool to see, especially with one making college decisions right now. I can just completely see where she's leaning into her geniuses, and I can play the other.
Yeah, the question is are we secure, or would we be secure enough as parents to borrow from our kids? So at what point do I borrow from the 10-year-old? Like, I really need to tap into your tenacity right now.
The tenacity, totally. Guess who's filling out all the scholarship forms and the FAFSA forms right now? Because it's not my sweet spot.
Yeah, totally. I get that. All right. Well, I'm going to flex now my W before we wrap up, even though that's not I think that has to be a competency of mine, but not.
Genius.
Yeah, genius. Thank you. I'm going to ask both of you guys this, and then I'm going to tell you my answer.
Okay.
What do you think was number 7 on the list? So I can't imagine that when he went through this that he started with a few and got to 6. My guess is he had 20 and then narrowed it to 6. So I'm wondering which one, like, do you guys, is there a category you feel like is pretty obvious that didn't make this list? Because as much as I appreciate kind of the simplicity and marketing and all that stuff, part of it's my brain, the way I'm wired, but I don't agree that there's only 6 working geniuses. But I'm rolling with it, and I think it's a great framework. But I think if you interviewed social scientists, other business people, they'd be like, where is this? Where's that attribute? Where's that genius? So there's one for me that stands out above all that I think is missing from the list. I want to know off the cuff if you guys can give me an attribute or characteristic or a genius that you think is not represented in those 6.
That is an interesting question, and I could sit here and ponder it for hours. I haven't thought about it.
Well, then you're going to have to come back to me on it.
That's your I coming out. I have not.
Is it my I or my W?
I think it's both, honestly. I think you're trying to invent the missing widget.
Yeah.
Reid does do that sometimes. It's like, I can't take something for face value. I must invent something new here.
Yeah, you're wondering whether or not they got everybody accounted for here, and then you're going to invent one just for safe measure,
I struggle with EOS with that. He knows that. I've been reminded in particular by ET, meaning Nicole, to fully submit, right, to EOS, which is very hard for me. All right, so I'm going to let you ponder on that. I'll just wait for an email or maybe the next podcast, or you can give me what number 7 should be.
Right. I mean, off the cuff, I immediately think like, where's the peacekeeper and where's the fact checker? But I can tell you, I can find a place for them. The peacekeeper is probably the galvanizer or discerner, and the fact checker is either the tenacity or the discerner. Like I can put anything into.
You can nest it, but you could also say it should be, because this is where you have to make choices. It could have been that it should be fact checker, and then you're nesting like tenacious or whatever underneath that. So I think it's still, there's well, anyways,
I'm dying to know now what your 7th is. David, do you have one? Did you just say the
Thank
Joker?
0.25 seconds.
Yeah.
0.25 seconds. I just saw the look on his face. I was like, here it comes.
I was like, is it gonna not work now because we've talked about it so long? I wanted to say Joker for this. What's your 7th?
So you're gonna ponder on it too? Or?
I was laughing at myself in my head too long. I couldn't think of anything else because I just had Joker in my mind.
So what is right now? What do not just marketers, but what does the next generation of the workforce here is the most valuable asset you can possibly have or characteristic to be successful in the world today?
I don't think it's going to be the most successful in the world today. I think it's been here all along. It's the interpersonal skills.
There you go. So it's EQ. And I have a hard time shoving that into one of them. I don't think that belongs in any of the widget right now.
I think it's
tell
all
me if
of
I'm
them.
wrong. Right. But is it not almost like Lord of the Rings? But it's like if there's a genius, because to me it is a genius. I think we have to acknowledge like not everybody's EQ is level. Like it is a huge gap. And so if you have somebody within your team that has an extremely high EQ, isn't that really important to know? And isn't there a ton of value in what they can bring, to a team? So when we talk about borrowing, it's like, how do we communicate this? It's not a matter of just being a galvanizer. It's like being able to socially like meet people where they're at. And I think that's my number 7 that I would love to see on the list.
But this now is what's the Colby framework?
Yeah, I was wondering if you were going to mention that. Yeah.
KOLBE, which is Janet.
Colby Index.
Yeah. So I'm one of those. Margaret, our EOS facilitator, said that I'm a hole poker or whatever. My hole poker in that is you just said what does everybody need to be successful in the decades to come? But if you can only have 2 geniuses, that means you're saying like whatever 80% of the audience won't have this EQ thing, therefore they're doomed. So where I'm going is like, I like Janet's thing where it's like, you to be an effective wanderer or effective at tenacity, you need high EQ. So that's more of like everyone must have it versus this individual.
Yeah.
I agree. I think the EQ is the overarching skill that's going to help you really digest the whole model and utilize it for yourself as self-awareness, but also for awareness of those around you. Everybody's got those 6 geniuses in some capacity, but your EQ is going to level out how you digest it all. I don't think EQ is one of those 6. I think it rests above it.
We're not going to be able to debate this now because I would like to.
I would love to.
I could accept, dropping it in as the multiplier.
That's exactly where my head was going.
Yeah. Or it's like if you got, but I could also and really would enjoy. So next time we grab something to drink or see each other, I'll debate it as my 7th. But that being said, I still think even if it weren't EQ, it is not to me realistic to think that he got to 6 bottoms up. I'm going to believe he put it up on the board and had a bunch of others and then kept nesting and nesting and nesting and nesting until he got to those 6. So my guess is that Pat Lincioni does have a 7th that for now is a mystery to the world. And I'd like to know what it is.
I think you should message him on LinkedIn. I bet he'd reply.
All right. That's like the tenacity thing. Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to follow.
Well, Janet, it's a pleasure to have you on. I love learning about what you're doing, building a community. If people want to learn more about what you're doing, where should we put them?
cadencems.com, or you can come find me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, Janet, thank you for, being a friend to us and, that super connector within the industry. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate being on again. And I love conversations with you. You guys always make me think a little deeper.
Yeah, likewise. All right, Janet. Well, next time.
Thank you.